From the beginning of his presidency, President Obama has committed himself and his administration to a foreign policy that ensures the safety of the American people. But he also refuses the false division between our values and our security. Can the United States be true to our values and ideals while also protecting the American people? I'm Ted Williams, and this week we debate U.S. foreign policy strategies in this episode we call Grading the President. This is The Professors.
From across the city and the 7 city colleges of Chicago, broadcasting from 63rd and Halsted at Kennedy King College. Professors take the art of conversation to a higher degree.
President Obama took the oath of office on January 20th. He has been in office nearly 11 months. What grade should we give the president on his foreign policy strategy? We have invited Professor Cranston Knight from Malcolm X College, Professor Max Galeas from Truman College, and our special guest, Rachel Bronson, Vice President of Programs and Studies at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Let's begin, I guess, with an overall conversation about how the president is doing. Rachel, what do you think? He's got a lot of foreign policy challenges. How do you think he's doing overall?
I think obviously the jury is still out, and 11 months is in some ways a lifetime, but it's really just a short amount of time. He's just staffing up, sadly but true, the way our system works. I think he's doing a pretty good job, but I think everybody is now waiting for him to define how his presidency is going to move forward. Yeah. So I think that in any grade that we eventually give, we have to acknowledge that he has inherited probably the most difficult international environment that certainly a president has inherited in recent memories. Both the deficit in support that America receives worldwide, but obviously this international economic crisis, much of which started here in the United States, but that he has had to negotiate and navigate with the implications for the whole world.
Well, I mean, we're fighting 2 wars. We're dealing with trying to, I guess, overall deal with global jihadism. And the president just won a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think that's a very interesting even place to begin our conversation, because for whatever reason, people believe that just his election, and I guess the rhetoric that he's put forth, is enough to believe that he'll move us towards peace on a lot of these issues. And so, what do you guys think? I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, first of all,
I get skittish with Nobel prizes that are unwarranted. It does seem like there was a symbolic prize awarded, and with regard to foreign policy, that's dangerous territory. Much of the reasons what Rachel mentioned at the very beginning, which is that we're waiting for a doctrine of some kind of theory. That we can test and judge this president against, so we can understand what he, if he's saying what he's doing and if he's doing what he's saying, which is the measure of all policy. Yeah. And there's a strategical and tactical problem here that it seems like the administration is behind on. Strategically, we don't know, but tactically, they're working within each region, it seems, to try to take care of as many problems as possible. But under what auspices? Are we looking at national security? Are we looking at economic security? Is it the environmental policy issues? Are we looking at human rights? Well, that's the biggest question.
Let's say this though. I think at a minimum he's not George Bush, and I think that strategy alone, I think wins him a lot of support. This notion that we're going to engage and move towards a sort of more peaceful foreign policy in the U.S. Now, whether that's in practice or not is the conversation that we'll have today. But on that alone, I think that there is a strategy laid out that I think people, for the most part, are excited about.
I would say you're correct. I think in terms of the Nobel Peace Prize, the implication that you could actually have peace, given the amount of chaos which exists in the world, just the implication of someone saying that we can move towards peace, that there can actually be peace, that actually can be non-nuclear proliferation, and actually we can actually destroy the vast majority of our nuclear weapons, and they actually live in a world in which you don't have to have nuclear weapons. In and of itself is revolutionary as far as I'm concerned.
But he's not himself making nuclear non-proliferation a major issue. I mean, this is certainly not something that he's saying that globally.
For Iran he is, but not for us.
Well, Iran. Well, very interesting in Iran, because there we do have a split between values and national security. And it does seem as if he's got this idea that open-ended negotiations, will in the end lead to something down the road that he hasn't himself tactically defined. That's a very serious problem to have with a regime that is as brutal as that one is. I mean, we have right now in Iran an incredible amount of human rights violations. People do not have the freedom to speak. They do not, and they're being thrown in prison for no reason. They're being raped and tortured just for simply speaking their minds, or voting for someone who was then, of course, overthrown. There was a coup d'état that took place in Iran. So there's a very dangerous situation with uranium enrichment, IAEA violations. It seems as if the Obama administration is ignoring human rights in Iran in order to negotiate a settlement over that issue. And that is a very dangerous precedent to take, because then other nations can do the same thing.
But let's talk about it, because the campaign, they called him naive for saying that he would sit down with top-level leaders in places like Iran. And so, but he's in a real serious quandary, because what do? If you move forward with a policy of appeasement, obviously you're going to have major problems. And we looked at that has not worked historically with a lot of tyrannical leaders. But on the flip side, if you move towards a sort of Bush-like policy of, it's us against the world, then where do we go? And I think what he's trying to navigate is the fine line between those two. And I don't, it's very difficult to please everyone on these issues. How do you all think he's doing in Iran?
I think the issue is a question of interest. For example, after Tiananmen Square, there wasn't major U.S. military troop movements. There wasn't major sanctions on China. Without question, there's an uproar among civilians in the United States in terms of the crush in Tiananmen Square. But that didn't change our relationship with China. So we have a test case. We have a test case here, in which we do have it. We have something that we can look at and say, okay, this did happen. Major human rights violations without question in China. But we did not change our policy towards China.
And Henry Kissinger was on TV saying what a great country it was, and in full support of the massacre.
Here's what I think he's trying to do, and this is maybe something that we can grade him on over the next couple of months. What he came in, and you made this point, when he came in, he wanted to shift America's approach to international relations. He wanted to fall back into multilateral institutions and organizations. He wanted to build alliances and coalitions. Bush administration said it wanted to do that too. It just wasn't effective in getting that done, but he was really committed to it. And I think on Iran, it's actually quite interesting. On Iran, what he wanted to do was to walk down and build a coalition around Iran to help it force it not to proliferate, to slow down its nuclear programs, to make some concessions. Now, in some ways, he was somewhat successful, because when they revealed the nuclear program, when they were in Pittsburgh, he got the leaders of France and Britain to stand up with him and say, this is unacceptable. Now, he didn't have the Russians and he didn't have the Chinese, but he had those two. I would say, given where we were coming from in the past administration, even getting our close European allies on board with us was actually a very important accomplishment. Can't have it all happen on. Now, what does he do with that? Can he bring others involved? Can he work this issue around in the UN or outside it to get others to stand up and say, this is unacceptable? They revealed a new program, but that is what, and just getting those two at his shoulders, which should be so easy.
But Great Britain has been with the United States all along, even with its most gratuitous, as we know, with the Iraq War, gratuitous policies. Sarkozy is the real winner there if you have him on. But I think Sarkozy is leading the charge in Iran as much as anything else, and that's where I find to be the problem with Obama is that the president at this point seems really to be playing catch up with regard to how to handle these various crises, and as a result of that, allies are now taking more of a role in leading the way.